Welcome everybody. We're here on another series of our Northwood Tech Talks. I am delighted to be here with Frank Pearce, our fire consultant and specialist today. So if you have any questions for Frank throughout our conversations, please do pop them in the chat and we'll get Frank to look at answering them for you. So let's get Frank on the call. Hi, Frank. Great to have you. How are you?
Great, Wendy, and thank you very much for the opportunity today. It's great to be able to talk to the industry and pass on a bit of knowledge.
Yeah, and I've certainly been looking forward to chatting to you. I've heard a lot about you. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you in person just yet, but delighted to see you today. So, Frank, we're here today to talk about the fire regulations and to tell our customers a little bit more about what's going on in that area. So the first question I'd like to ask you is, who regulates the fire industry?
Well, unfortunately, unlike the security industry and all the various other industries which are in the PSA, the surprising thing for most people is that the fire industry is totally unregulated, which again is more surprising, bearing in mind that it's a life safety industry. But unfortunately, there is no regulation. Now, the fire industries have been trying for many years to have regulation or licensing of some description, but unfortunately, there's no take up from the powers that be for regulation.
Okay, so do we know why? Do we know why that they've made that decision, or
there's never been any direct answer as to why. I have my own feelings and my own suspicions about it. But if you consider that if there was regulation of the industry, the powers that be again would have to establish training regimes. They'd have to establish licensing, again, a bit like the PSA. But also they would have to have an inspectorate of some format. And unfortunately, most of the inspection and work that's done in that area is done by the fire services. Now they're pinned to their collar and trying to keep up with what they do at the moment. There are only 350 or thereabouts fire officers in the country, and they're out inspecting buildings and various things. So they don't have time to inspect people. I don't think it's going to happen in the near future, although we're trying very hard. And there are some European regulations which might drive us to that direction, but not just yet.
Okay. And so are there any qualifications that you would need to work in the fire detection industry?
Again, it's so loose. You could be a waitress. I don't mean to run down a waitress or anything, but you can be a waitress and go off and commission a fire alarm system tomorrow if you feel like it. There's absolutely no qualifications required for the fire industry. And when I say qualifications required, I mean in a formal sense. There obviously would be qualifications in as much as you need to be competent to actually do the work you're carrying out. But in terms of working either as designer, installer, commissioning parties to service or do anything like that, there are no qualifications demanded of anybody, which is again too loose.
Yeah, absolutely. So you spoke about designing there. So who can design a fire detection and alarm system? Who does it at the moment? Is it?
It's open. Most designs will be done by consulting engineers and people in that sphere, or maybe people who are directly involved in the fire industry. But again, anybody can design a fire alarm system. It is simply a matter of having the knowledge, picking up a copy of the standards. And the standards are fairly detailed in as much as they do give you the basics for doing what I would call a layout of a fire alarm system. Now, a lot of people would say a layout is a design, but that's not actually the case. A design of a fire alarm system has a deeper requirement. It's okay, we can all put a smoke detector on the ceiling, fine, that's all very well, and we can put an alarm sounder in the hallway or whatever it be. But what way do you set it up? how do you get people to evacuate? What way do you operate the fire alarm system? So there's two aspects to design. One is layout, and the other is the more in-depth area of what we would call the fire strategy. And if, unfortunately, fire strategies are a very high level. You need a lot of knowledge of building construction, fire reaction, and various other things. So anybody can design a layout of a fire alarm system. It's relatively easy, follow the rules. But designing a fire detection and alarm system is a different matter altogether.
Okay. Okay. And a single person or a company, are they allowed to do it? They are allowed to design it, is it?
Yes, and as I say, anybody can do it. There's often a question asked, which maybe you're sort of aiming to, is who can design, install, test, commission, service? There was at one stage, we'll say, an impression that if you did design, you couldn't install. If you did the install, you couldn't commission. If
Sure.
only one discipline. But
Okay.
you could actually do all disciplines. There is no restriction on anybody. So a single person or a single company can design, install, test, commission, service, verify, do the whole lot. So all of the disciplines are open to anybody at all at this point in time.
Well, that's great information, Frank, because I mean, I would be surprised if everybody is aware of that in the industry.
Very few people would be aware who would be in the peripheral industries. If you are directly involved in the fire industry, say companies with a 90% business on the fire industry or bigger companies, they would be totally au fait with that. But smaller players, sole traders, small companies, or people who are multidisciplined, such as intruder plus CCTV and fire and that sort of thing, they wouldn't be fully aware of the looseness that actually is in the fire industry until, of course, they get into the industry and they find that they're being undermined by, if I use the term cowboys, everybody in the industry will understand what we're talking about, because there's a lot of chancers out there making money and doing nothing. And it's not good, because it is life safety we're actually talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And do you think, though, that it might be something that the smaller companies could think about now to certainly, I suppose, to upskill and maybe look at delving in that area? But obviously, with the right training, as you said, it's life safety. But that it might not be something that they've thought of, I suppose.
I think that most people who would try and enter into the fire industry with any sort of morals behind them would look for the proper training and knowledge before they get involved in the actual industry. It is hard to find people who will give you training. There are a couple of companies around. One I was involved with, which is PCCE, who is very well known in the industry, and they will give you training, but they can only give you training in the theory and some of the application of, that'll be about the standards and how to apply particular detectors in particular areas. But in terms of actually doing the work, you need a lot of experience. So the only way to do that is to work alongside, more or less serving sort of an apprenticeship, but obviously it's not an apprenticeship at this stage in people's lives. But it is the only way you will pick up a huge amount of information purely by practice and doing the actual installations or commissioning or servicing or whatever it is. But it's a long haul. It's not something you can pick up overnight. It's something that takes time to actually gather.
Yeah, absolutely. So can we talk about who can service the fire detection system then? So who's able to
in terms of servicing, when we wrote the standards, most people are aware that I actually wrote the existing standards or was involved with the committees on those for the last 20 years or so. And we recognized a big problem in service of fire systems. So much so that we defined service and maintenance as two different items. The reason being that a lot of the fire alarm systems are what we call closed protocol, meaning that you can't get access into them unless you have specialist equipment or specialist knowledge of those particular systems, and you can't buy spares for them because the sources are very, very limited. But legally, it is a requirement for every owner of a fire alarm system to service their equipment. So
Okay.
if they were being blocked from servicing or having it serviced by their supplier of choice, they would then be illegal in operating their building. So we said, okay, service is testing and reporting on the fire alarm system, and maintenance is when you actually do work on the fire system. So you get into the nitty gritties, then you do need the expertise and the proper tools and equipment. But the service equipment system, it is simply that you test for smoke detectors and call points and all the various pieces connected to it and report to the owner. Then if there is a problem, they can take action if they have to go to see a specialist or something like that. But it means that the customer is now compliant legally. And anybody, of course, can do that service work. In fact, even the customer could do his own service work, which is
Wow,
a bit of an anomaly. But the
that's
core
incredible.
item is you must be competent. You have to be competent. And as we said earlier, in terms of who can service or commission or do various things, anybody can. But when you do the work, if you're design, you have to sign off a design certificate. If you commission, you have to sign off a commissioning certificate. So every aspect that you do, you have to sign off a certification. Now, there is one little anomaly in terms of regulation. The Fire Services Act has a paragraph in it which says, and I paraphrase, that to sign off or to issue a document or procure a document for the benefit of the fire officers, which is anyway untrue, is actually a criminal offence under the Fire Services Act. So if,
Okay.
for example, you serviced a fire alarm system or signed off that you'd serviced the fire alarm system but hadn't done it properly, well, you would actually be committing a criminal act because the service document is for the customer's benefit, but
Okay.
at the next step is for the benefit of the fire officer because he has to have it proved to him that the work has been done and done properly. So while you don't need qualifications and there's no regulation, you can sign yourself into jail.
Oh
Stop,
my
stop it. Don't pass go. Straight to
God. Monopoly.
yeah, it's one of those little anomalies. But of course, the fire officers don't have time to be out checking everybody and doing various things like that, you know.
Of course, yeah. So then what kind of training is recommended for a fire detection engineer then?
Well, mainly you have to have knowledge of the equipment. So if you're going to get knowledge of the equipment, people like Northwood now would run training courses from the suppliers, and that's excellent. So the suppliers arrive and they teach people how to manipulate the panels, how to use the detectors, how they're connected properly. So that type of training on the hardware is very, very important, and mostly it comes from the manufacturers, the suppliers or the distributors. The distributor may have an expert inside in their own office or something. And then to go out and get the information in terms of standards, you would go to someone like PCCE or some other specialists in terms of training on standards. But again, Northwood now would use me and I would come in and do training on standards for the customer base. And they'll pick up quite a bit on that. But the only thing we can't train you in is experience. We cannot give you experience. You have to get out there and do it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's probably interesting to introduce a small item here. In Europe, there is a standard which is EN 16763, and that standard is services for the fire and security industry. Now, the standard exists for probably about 5 or 6 years at this stage. And the word services is very important. It's not servicing, it's services. And it
Okay.
covers any discipline that you do in the intruder or fire industry, which covers design, installation, commissioning, maintenance, service, any work you do are all covered under this European standard. Now, unfortunately, a country has to adopt the standard formally before it becomes law. So at the moment, it's a European standard. Use it if you like, but it's not law. Now, it may become law in Ireland in the fire standards, maybe in about a year and a half or 2 years. But basically, the standard says that you must have records of training in the products that you're using. So in other words, your staff have to be trained. You have to have records of the training. You can't work on any system where you haven't got training on that particular product. So if, for example, I was working on a Morley panel, but I was trained on advanced panels, I'm not compliant. The second part of this is that not only have you got to have training on the hardware, but you must have training on the technicalities and the standards, and also have experience behind you. So the EN 16763 is a very good small document, not too onerous, but it's quite a lot in it. And if it is developed, it will mean that the control will be reverted back effectively to local government levels, which means it doesn't have to be the fire services. It can be just at local government level. And everybody will have to have proper and adequate training and carry training records. So there's more in the standard than that, but that's the core end of it, really. So that would be...
If somebody, Frank, wanted to see that document, where would they, would it be, is it online or?
All European documents are free to download from the European websites, www.eu.ie. Sometimes it's a bit hard to find these documents when you get into the websites. I work on European standards and I have special access, and even I get lost. It takes ages. But if you Googled EN 16763, it will probably direct you to the direct place in the European website. And you can download it free of charge. It's only a small document, and well worth reading because it's quite informative of what the future is going to bring.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, look, Frank, thank you so much for sharing all that information with us. You're a fountain of knowledge, and I'm hoping this is the first of many interviews that we do around training and regulations. That would be great. I'm sure our customers would love, the installers would love to see more of you. So
will I stand up?
Yes. So Frank, listen, thanks so much, and I'm going to say goodbye now to everybody. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, Frank, is that possible?
Yes, Northwood have my email, my direct email, but people are free to email me on pierce@indigo.ie at any time. I work a reference desk here all the time, so an awful lot of customers have my telephone number, so they call me quite a lot. So I'm happy to take the calls. Yeah.
Thank you, Frank. We appreciate it. So from myself and from Frank, until next time, we'll see you on Northwood Tech Talks in a couple of days. Thanks, Frank. See you soon.
Thank you, Wendy. Bye-bye all.
Thank you.